So hi guys, welcome to issue 44 of the Eddie Stobart. Now I'm afraid there isn't really anything to do in this issue, it's just collecting a few parts. However, I did find a really interesting article in the last issue. I didn't want to go through it in the last issue because there's so many mods to do. I didn't want a massive long video. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at the parts for this issue and then we'll talk about the article from the last issue.
The road from coast to coast, Yorkie and me rolling on. 'Cause a long day's run can be short on fun without Yorkie to help me along.
So these are the parts for issue 44, and this is the outer left rear wheel, and there are only 3 parts, which I will go through with you. So this is nothing you haven't seen before. So first of all, we have this beautiful outer left rear wheel rim. This is the outside, and the detail on that is wonderful. You could consider weathering it up. I personally wouldn't, because we know that the Eddie Stobarts are cleaned on a daily basis, so this is likely to be really clean. This part is 4402. This is plastic. This is the outer left rear wheel rim, and we know from past experience it's going to go on like that. Why we can't put it on this issue? Well, we could, I suppose, but that's how that goes on. And then lastly, we have 5 2.3 by 4mm screws. These are PM screws, which what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop those into my little container. I'm really happy that they put the sizes on. Sometimes they don't put the sizes, and as you see, I've labelled my screws by size. I may actually change my little system, and these ones I might put a little label there, DD03. But that's the parts for this issue. So what I'd like to do now is there was an article in the last issue which I will have brought up now. And it's extremely useful. It's something that I go by every single day, and what it is, it's the working time directive. And what this does is it sets out laws to protect the driver and to protect the public and to protect the operator, and it's to stop you from working too much, to make sure you have enough break, and so on and so forth. So what you'll see on this article, this diagram, you'll see at the bottom tachograph symbols, and you will see 4 different types of symbol, and they're fairly they're fairly simple to understand. And what you'll have is you'll have a machine, and you get a card, you put your card in, and this card records everything that you are doing. So the first symbol you can see there is driving, and that is a picture, a very basic picture of a steering wheel. So obviously when you're driving, you're operating the steering wheel. So you'll have a little picture come up on your tachograph machine to show that. The next one is rest or break time, and that's a very simple drawing of a bed. So the bed represents you having a rest. Obviously you don't have to go to bed, but it's obviously it's a nice simple system. The third symbol is other work. Now what other work is any work that you're doing that isn't driving. So for example, myself being a coach driver, when I'm driving I have the steering wheel on. When I'm loading passengers, I do other work, paperwork, loading, etc. And there's a reason for this. I'll go through all of the work and the break, but obviously what you want to do is minimize your driving, minimize your working hours, so that you can get more work in. Now the last one is one that I don't use so often. It's called period of availability, and it's where you're with your vehicle, you're not on a break, and you're not driving. So For example, if you're a lorry driver, you may come into a supermarket, into their delivery area, and then they may say, right, can you go and park up there, and when a loading bay becomes available, you can then move your lorry onto the loading bay, and that would be called a period of availability. So what I'll do now is I'll go through all the basic rules with you, and then we'll talk about how we can change those rules. So at a most basic level, you're allowed to work 9 hours driving, right, which can be increased to 10 hours, but let's look at them simple. So you're allowed 9 hours driving, and that's your limit for the day. Now, it doesn't mean you can only work a 9-hour day, it means you can only drive for 9 hours. So for example, if you worked for 10 hours, 5 hours was, for example, loading up, 5 hours for driving, that is 5 hours driving time. Next, you have got a maximum of 56 hours weekly driving limit. So that's the number of hours you can drive. Again, you can work more than that, but you can't drive for more than that. So 56 hours works out at about 9 hours a day, 10 hours, yeah, something like that. And then the next one, you have maximum 90 hours fortnightly driving limit. Now this is the one that confuses people quite a lot. This is a rolling 2-week period. So to simplify, if you worked 45 hours driving every week, that's fine. If you then 1 week you did 50 hours, the following week you can only drive for 40 hours. So 50 and 40 is 90. But then the following week after that, because you only did 40 hours the previous week, you can now drive up to 50. So next thing is your brakes, and your brakes can be a little bit confusing. First of all, you must have 45 minutes for every 4.5 hours you drive. Now, as one of the things that I often say to my company, that 4.5 hours, that's a limit, not a target. So you could have a break after 2 hours, and you could have another break after 4.5 hours, and you could have another break after half an hour, and so on and so forth. And sometimes it's quite beneficial to split that break into 2. And if you want to split that break, your first break must be 15 minutes minimum, and your second break must be a minimum of 30. They can be more, but they can't be less. Now, once you have completed 45 minutes worth of break, you are then free to do up to 4.5 hours driving. So let me give you a quick example. At the most simplest situation, you could drive for 4.5 hours, you could then have a 45-minute break, then you can drive for another 4.5 hours, and that's your 9 hours daily limit. Now, if you were to take your break a little bit early, so you could, for example, drive for 2 hours, then you could take a 45-minute break. Your driving hours then resets. You can then do 4.5 hours. What I've done in the past is I've done a lorry delivery, a small 7.5 ton, and I knew that I wouldn't have that much time because I was in London. I needed to be in and out as quickly as I can. So what I've done is I've driven all the way down there. When I got just to the outskirts of London, I found somewhere that I could have a break. I then had a 15-minute break. I then went and did my delivery, and then because I was getting close to my 4.5 hours, I then took a half an hour break, which reset my hours. So next is your rest period, and when you finish your shift, you must have a minimum of 11 hours before you begin your next shift. Now that can be reduced to 9 hours 3 times a week, but let's take it nice and simple. It's an 11-hour rest. So now you can begin to see that if you're doing 9 hours driving and you have 11 hours rest, that's now only a 20-hour day. so you can actually get 4 more hours of work in. Now, the bit that gets a little bit confusing is a weekly rest period. You must have, I don't know why they came to this figure, but they came up with, you must have a 45-hour break, which is almost 2 days, once a week, and that has to be taken within a week. So it's not 1 week from the last one. Now, just to go back a little bit, the taco week always starts on a Monday, or I believe it starts on your working week. So if your company works Monday to Saturday, it must be in any one of those periods, you must have a 45-hour break. Once you've done 45-hour break, everything resets. Now, you can reduce that to 24 hours. But you then must have 45 hours the following week. So sometimes what coach drivers might do is they'll work a 6-day week 1 week and then work a 5-day week the next. So then you have, and a lot of these are law for everybody, not just tachograph drivers, but the Working Time Rules Directive 2002/15/EC. So your working time must not exceed 48 hours in a week. Now it says no opt-out. Now I believe in normal law for like everybody, you cannot be forced to work more than 48 hours. The maximum working time of 60 hours in 1 week, and there's a maximum working time of 10 hours if the night work is performed. Now, I do a lot of night driving, but I double man, and that's where it gets a little bit slightly more flexible. If I say, for example, I drive for, let's keep it simple, let's say I do a 16-hour journey from somewhere, then what I can do is I can put my tachograph in, I can drive for 4 hours, then I pull over, and then I put my card in to what we call driver 2, and driver 1 takes over for 4 hours. I'm now classed as being on rest for 4 hours, and my other driver is on 4 hours. So now when he does his 4 hours driving, I've now had a rest, so I can now drive for 4.5 hours, and so it goes on. So they are the very basic rules. They do get a little bit more complicated in some situations. For example, if you're doing overnight stays, if you're doing ferry work changes everything. And I'll be honest with you, you tend to sort of follow the rules, and closely the rules that you follow all the time. I don't do much ferry work, so I don't really focus on the ferry work. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to compare those rules with what we call domestic hours. Now, if you go to work in the morning, you jump on a service bus, that driver takes you to work. He's generally following UK domestic driving rules, which is slightly different from tachograph. General rule of thumb, you need to be on a tachograph if you are travelling more than 50 kilometres from base. So this is how service bus drivers get to use different rules. So 9 hours daily driving limit on the tachograph. On the domestic hours, that is increased to 10 hours. So your bus driver who takes you to work could be driving and working for 10 hours. We still have the 6 hours that we can work without a break. However, when it comes to taking the break, tachograph users must have a 45-minute break. Your domestic driver, that is reduced to 30. General rule of thumb, most companies will give them a 40-minute break because that gives a little bit of allowance if they run late, but its minimum they can have is 30 minutes. Now, the tachograph rules, it states that the break can be split into 2 periods. And you can have 45 minutes in the form of 15 minutes and 30. With a domestic driver, they can split their break down to 20 minutes. However, if they have 20-minute breaks, they must have an hour's worth of break. The rest period is tachograph users must have 11 hours. Now with domestic drivers, that is reduced to 8.5 hours. And then lastly, the weekly rest period with a tachograph, you must have 45 hours a week, which obviously can be reduced to 24. Domestic is a little bit different. They must have 1 day off in a 2-week period, so they can actually work 13 days straight. So yeah, that's I mean, I think that's rather interesting. It's you can see that just comparing the domestic hours with the tachograph hours, you can see how much more rest that a tachograph user will get, and therefore, you know, a tired driver is a dangerous driver. If a driver is well refreshed, then obviously they can do their job a little bit more efficiently, and they can stay alive, so they can do their job next week. The difference between domestic bus hours and tachograph is, I think, is quite a big difference. And you can also see that even having domestic hours, you know, there has been instances in the past, and I think this is in the minority, where operators have really abused their drivers and really forced them to work many hours. And even with the domestic hours, that gives the driver a lot of protection, and it enables them to have some rest. So there you go, guys. I hope you found that interesting. I certainly do, and it's something that I live by. But yeah, so yeah, that's it. So guys, we are doing some building in the next issue. Let me just switch my camera. There we go. So this is the next issue. This is going to be issue 45, and we're going to be doing the inner left. Have I done that right? Yes. Sorry guys, I got that wrong. I'm looking at the wrong magazine. Right, so this is the next issue, and we'll be getting a left rear tyre. So again, we've done this before. You know the score. Without even looking at the magazine, we know that we're going to put these two together, and then we're going to pop the tyre onto there, and then we'll have one wheel, which of course means that you will know what's coming in the next two issues. So we'll have another issue of doing not an awful lot. We'll just get some parts, but that's okay, because that's the last issue of the 4, which means that I can do some spoilers with you, and I have got quite a few spoilers actually. At the time of filming this episode, I can spoil all the way up to issue 56. Because my subscription is a little bit behind the news agents, some of this you'll already know from other YouTubers, but it'll still be fun to talk about. So as usual, thank you very much for supporting my channel and watching my videos. I really do appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next issue.